Cammy came to me in January, and she came to me on a Friday, and she said, I think we need to go to Antarctica. And I had no sort of prior warning of this. And I said, okay, and she told me a little bit about it, and I thought, oh, it's a bit... She said, look, it's you snooze, you lose. You either get on this or we don't. Our company's not going to do this for another couple of years. And so she talked about it, and I thought, yeah, let's just go. And it sounded good, it sounded exciting. It was fairly expensive. And I thought, all right, off we go. We're going to go to Antarctica. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but to be honest, I was feeling a little bit ragged at church. Really tired, really pushed down, and just kind of like, what do you do? What's next? The last thing I thought was that I would get some answers in Antarctica that would be different than what I would get here. That was the last thing I was thinking. And one of the most amazing things is Cammy and I have this wonderful, relationship. But what happened in that trip, it was strengthened. We got this time. We just had to hang out together. We don't do that. Normally I'm going to do this, and she's off to do this, and we're busy, and we're going in a myriad of different directions. And we were drawn together. We actually had to spend a whole lot of time together. And I got to realize just how wonderful she is in my life. And it was just like a real refreshing time. And just to see the adventurous spirit in Cammy. And it's funny, when I was being considered in the Baptist Union, we had to go through these processes. You have to go through a lot of processes as a pastor. At one time, you had to go through this accreditation process, which was quite extensive. It took me about 18 months to go through it. And then you had to go through, an ordination process, and now you have to go through a registration process. So all of these things are... But in the accreditation process, there was a counseling thing where we had to go and see this Miriam Brown, and we had to go through this 2 weekends of counseling and filling out forms, and they had to send off an application back to Canada with the results of her analysis and all that. And she said what came back was that we were extremely compatible. In fact, she had not seen anybody more compatible as a husband and wife than we were on paper. And I thought that was remarkable, but I thought, no, we're so different. I did. I actually left that thinking, no. I think we filled out the paperwork wrong because she is so different from me. But see, that's the way God meant it to be. That God would bring us, we don't have to be the same. But we've got to be able to see the beauty in the other person. And I think there's times when we're put together and we've got to see how wonderful the person is that God has brought us together with. And for me, it was like, I want to look at this, but today I want to look at reflections of the heart. I want to go into some different things. It's a different process than I normally would use. And I'm so thankful that Len was able to preach for a couple of weeks, and then Sid came in. I listened to all three messages. And I was blessed by all three. So it was kind of cool that I was away and then still be able to listen to the messages. So I appreciate the fact that Nick, I don't know how you do it, but he puts them together and puts it up online. And, if you miss church, you can always just go online and get this message. And I think it's important for us. So Cammy has this idea of going to Antarctica. Then I have to find out, we've got to wear warm clothes. We don't have warm clothes. And so we had to pick up different things. And she had some people give us some stuff. And away we went down to Antarctica to this adventure. And it was a long trip. We had to fly all the way to Argentina, Buenos Aires, then down to Ushuaia, which is right down on the bottom of Argentina, and then get on a ship and then sail to Antarctica for... it was a 10-day, 11-day, I guess, cruise, 10 nights. And the Drake Passage, when you cross over this passage, it's like this, it can be a washing machine sea. It's one of the most difficult crossings that you can do anywhere in the world. We got a lake on the way over. It was just, We got the washing machine on the way back. We didn't miss out on any experience. But it was an amazing time together to see different things. And I don't know what I thought I was going to see, but just floating around with icebergs everywhere and penguins just jumping out of, their little colonies into the water and all this sort of stuff. Whales and leopard seals and all kinds of different seals. All this stuff that happened. But it reminded me how extraordinary God is. Like God is far beyond our comprehension. The minute we put God in a box, it shows us how small our thinking is. God is magnificent and he's worthy to be praised. And I want to go to this Psalm of David, and the reason why is because he had insight. And I don't often use a psalm, but he had insight. And when I was reading that this week, I'm thinking, look at this. This is for us as a church. So this might be a little bit longer now, but that'll be shorter in the meeting. And I think we can say amen to that. You know what I mean? Like, it's always good there. But I think that for me, it was looking at this, it was the most unlikely journey ever that we would do. I had never thought about going to Antarctica. It had never crossed my mind, to be honest. And then Cammie's all excited about this, and we get down there, and it just brought us together, and our relationship is stronger because we did what we thought we should do. And that this was offered to us, there was an opportunity, and we had to jump on it. And but from Friday to Sunday was our decision processes, and she's got this thing booked. I'm going, we're off, to this place. And sometimes it's like that. Sometimes you have a lot of time to think about things. Other times you just have to be able to jump on something that comes your way. While we were there, we were cruising through different things, and the captain actually had the right to change the cruise because of problems. So he wanted to go into a particular passage, but there was a big iceberg blocking the way. And so he said, we're not going to do that. We're going to go into a different passage because you know that icebergs, 10% is out of the water, 90% is under the water. And when they decide to roll, you get a tsunami wave as well as anything that can fall on you, So it's pretty potent stuff. And while we were down there, we saw different things. We saw the tsunami wave come across a bay and all kinds of interesting things. But anyway, so we went there in this ship and to cruise around and we had a wonderful time. But there was a time when we were asked to climb to the top of this hill. So we pulled into this bay. We came in on the Zodiacs, which is these little rubber boats that bring us off the ship. And we got off. We had to climb the hill. And Cammie is a goer. Like she's just going to go to the top of the hill. And I'm going, it's a long way up there, And I'm thinking, what's the point of going to the top of the hill? And people did. People turned back and I said, I'm just going to go back. I've seen enough, you can see out in the bay, and she's still wanting to climb to the top. Anyway, we went to the top. And this guide says to us, right, what I want you to do is I want you to move over there about 50 meters and be quiet, to go up there. And a lot of people didn't make it up there to listen to his words. But he said, be very still, make no noise, and listen. I have never heard anything like this in my life. I've never experienced anything like this in my life. This Arctic silence. It was just of another world to be up there and just to stand. And so we did that for a certain amount of time, and then it was time to go back to the guide, go back down. But I think that our ears aren't used to the Arctic silence. We're not used to hearing anything like this. We're accustomed to the constant noise of everyday life. We don't even, there's noise going on here now. Everywhere we are in Brisbane, there's noise. We're used to the noise. That Arctic silence was extraordinary. And it made you just sit there and reflect on think about God and the magnificence of God on this hill. And we got back to where this guide was. And hang on, let me go back again to that. I don't want to break into that. And the guide said, Cami came past the guide and she said, we heard that there was some ice breaking in the distance. And there was a small avalanche. She could hear that, and I heard that too. And then she said, there were whales singing. There weren't whales singing. I didn't hear a thing. She said there was whales singing. Did you hear them? I said, no. And she walked off. And the guide said, she's the only person other than me to hear that. I heard the whales singing, and so did she. And I thought, why is it that some people can get on the frequency to hear this, but others can't? I was there. I was silent. I was doing as I was told. I did not hear whales singing the song of whales. And she did. And they were way off in a bay, who knows where. But she could hear this. And the silence enabled us to pick up on all sorts of things that was taking place. But I think it's this noise of constant life. And we get off the cruise and we get back to fly back here and we're back into Australia, and immediately it's the news and things like that I'm listening to. But this week, I'm thinking that we have probably a new noise, and it's this post-COVID noise, or all of the things that are happening in society that have influenced all sorts of people. I actually don't know that we'll understand the psychological impact of COVID on these generations, especially these children, on young kids. I actually don't think we'll know. Because this is unprecedented in history, and then the impact that's had on all of you, by the way, where there were pressures on you, these lockdowns and the fact that we had all of this introduced to us that almost was like some sort of movie scenario, not like real life. Okay, we all went through this together. So it's not like as if, well, that's normal church life. It wasn't normal church life. It was a whole different experience. And it smashed us. And it made us interact with one another and relate to one another differently. Do you realize, because I spent this time with Cami away, I realized the importance of relationship with one another. And yet in COVID times, it was social distancing and change. So I don't think you will understand just everything that's going on within your mind or my mind because of what has taken place. We're just living with this. And there was noise. The police commissioner resigned this week. And, I've often watched her on TV. I thought, she's amazing because she has she's kind of got a tender heart, but she's been strong. And I think she's just listened to so many voices, and she's been under so much pressure, coming in from youth crime, all of the problems with youth, all of these things that there's an inundation of information, and everybody's become an expert, I think, through social media. Everybody can tell you what's wrong with everything, and for her, I think quitting made much more sense. She got to that point. But then also Woolworth's CEO quit this week. And it's like everybody has jumped on Woolworths because Woolworth's making a bucket load of money. Farmers are crying out. They're not getting paid properly for their stuff. There's a discrepancy in the fact that they're getting paid less and Woolworths is making heaps of profit. But you realise Woolworths is just listening to their shareholders. The CEO quit this week. Why? Because he was doing his job. But just the voices just the pounding of society on him for the fact that he's tried to do the right thing by his shareholders. And shareholders, if you're not going to get the dividends or you're not going to get the returns, they'll jump ship and go somewhere else. And during this time of COVID, where interest rates were low, shares were, a priority. Now that interest rates have risen, people are able to move their money into different things because. And so there's pressure. The CEO just said, "Yeah, I'm done." And I think this happens. I think this is the noise. And we just and there's more than this. I could just go on and on and on with what's taking place. And just being in Antarctica where I didn't have to listen to any of that. And then get back here and realize that, we can't put our head in the sand. We can't, just because we don't know what's going on doesn't mean there's not problems in our society. And but I want to bring it back to us as in our understanding of things. You realize that this is a church, evangelical Christianity, because often I could say, well, this is a Baptist church, which it is. But a lot of you have come from different backgrounds, different groups. But evangelical Christianity, the fact that we believe that a person must experience a spiritual birth, be born again, and there's a regeneration of the person. And it's not, and I think almost the rise of conversations in America is that evangelicalism has everything to do with politics. You're either with the Democrats or you're not, or you're with this group or you're with that. But we jump back and forth. And there's been so much pressure on churches in America that it's almost a fundamental belief that if you're in church, you should align yourself with Trump or Biden. This is actually what's happened. There's a division there in their churches. You almost should put a sign out the front, we are pro-Trump. That way everybody will just be pro-Trump, no problem. We are pro-Biden, because there's division. How did this happen in churches? How did politics come into it? How was this even possible? But it is, and it's a driving force in America. It's not our call living in Australia. We have no idea what's going on there. And the fundamentals behind American history and their church development and everything else, we really can't understand what's going on with people there, but this is what's happening. But we believe in the love of God, and I think this is paramount in our understanding as Christians. We believe in the love of God and His mercy. Salvation is the mercy of God. Salvation is not because we were awesome. It's that. And this is a fundamental belief. But we believe in heaven and hell. Now, this is what really got me early on before I went into ministry, because I sat and I thought, if this is real, right? If heaven is a real place, hell is a real place, what am I doing? And it made me cry. Because I thought, what am I doing? I'm living my life in business. I'm doing things. I was running a massive factory. And I thought, what is important? What is really important? And there's a message here in this. And I thought, we believe people will spend eternity in hell unless they experience God's saving work. We actually believe that as a church. And this is important because this is fundamental. This is like foundational stuff. Because otherwise church becomes a social enterprise, compliant with whatever's going on with what people want us to do. And this is the great message of the gospel is Jesus died on a cross. This is where the mercy of God was established. That justice has been served, that Jesus took away the sin of the world. Now, this is foundational stuff. It doesn't matter what group you come from. Anybody coming out of the Reformation, Luther, it's this. All of the groups, we all believe this. And to some degree, some people discount, what it looks like, but it's still at the base of our thinking. And this is why Jesus is central. That he is the good news. Jesus Christ is the good news. And I thought, it's so important for me to establish that and for us to think about this. Because otherwise, what do? We just go on with life. We show up at church because we're used to doing that. And this becomes part of our life. Or not. We might be there a lot. We might be there. Do you realize that they're saying I just read this statistic yesterday, 40% of evangelicals do not attend church. Just don't go. It's just not a done thing. And so there's shifts in people's thinking. And I think that I bring it back down to the church has really got to look at what is our mission. And the mission is the main objective. The mission of Jesus Christ, that his good news would be spread throughout the world. It's his mission. But how we do church is our model. And I want to use those two terms, like mission and model. The model is how we go about doing what we do. But the mission is what we're supposed to be doing. Why do we exist? We exist for mission. We exist to share the good news about the love and mercy of God through Jesus Christ. This is getting harder and harder and harder to do because people say, I was on the ship and somebody said to me, oh, what do you do? I said, oh, I'm a pastor. He said, oh, you're not one of those groups that thinks that you got all the answers and you're the only ones going to heaven, are you? I said, of course not. Even the Methodists will get there too. No. I did not say that. But I was thinking, of course, but I was actually thinking denominations. I wasn't thinking like he was thinking. And he could have been thinking about a lot of different stuff. And that guy stayed away from me for the rest of the cruise. He's like, see me coming, he was off. But a problem exists when we maintain a model of church that doesn't serve our mission objectives. So we say, well, this is the most important thing, is how we do church is the most important thing. Now, I like my church. I like how we do it. I like, the gatherings. I like everything about this, or I like those songs. I like what we do. But if it doesn't serve our mission, we're actually focusing on the model. And so our love and our appreciation is not for the mission of Christ, but is actually the model of church that we've developed. And this could have developed over, many years. And we are all influenced by models. I'm fortunate because I get to go into India and Africa, and the US and here, and man, it's different. I've seen just some of the simplest things. I grew up in Papua New Guinea where they would have church service. It would go for 6 hours, but it would, it was just like very different. And so I've seen different things that happen. But it is this I think, in my way of thinking, and this is my reflection. I'm reflecting what I think is important. I think this mission is crucial. Andy Stanley wrote this book, Deep and Wide, and I started to look through it this week, and I just picked out a few things that he said, and he said, the actual mission of most churches is to pay the bills. Andy Stanley wrote that. I think he's right. I think that is the driving force. How do we keep the wheels on the programs? And paying the bills and keeping things going. Do you realize that a lot of you I'm sure a lot of you don't realize this, that the only way this church survives is if you put money into this church. The Baptist Union does not put one single dollar into this church. Do you know that? The money doesn't come from anywhere else but from you. And it comes into the way the system is. But we cannot just survive to just, let's just keep the church going. And there isn't an urgency of mission until the money starts running out. When people start sending emails because, we see the money running out. You think we don't see that? We're not silly. Then suddenly people are concerned about reaching people. And we need to reach young families. That is the catch cry. I've heard that we need to reach young families. Well, I've thought about this. I think it's true. But we actually don't have a how. And we'll often say, we need to reach this community. That is a generalization. How? And we'll say it to each other. We need to reach the community. We need to be outward focused. But what does that look like? What we'll do is we'll maintain our model. And so how do we adjust to this, but we maintain our model? If they, and this is, Andy Stanley says, if they aren't reaching new people, they get a new pastor. That is a solution for churches. They go, it's not working, so let's get a new pastor. He writes this. Why did I use Andy Stanley? I mean, lots of people are saying lots of things. But years and years and years and years ago, I read something that he wrote, and it changed everything for me. And I'll come back to that. And the Psalm of David is written in his exile. This Psalm 40. And it starts off, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me and heard my cry. So this is David, King David. But think about David. Think about his beginnings. He comes from this family where he's the shepherd. He's the expendable one in the family going out and looking after the sheep. And when they were fronting up to find out who could be the king, he was the least likely candidate of the brothers. Remember that? And then when the brothers were off to war, Dad sends him off with some cheese to bring a report back. He's like a messenger for him. And so even Dad didn't see the value, but yet he's been anointed king. And then he goes in to Saul. Saul was the one they wanted as king. Why did they want Saul? They wanted Saul because he was a head higher than everybody else, because they felt like if we have a really big king, he can fight our battles for us and we will win. And Saul wasn't God's choice. Saul was the people's choice. David was God's choice. And here's David. He's in exile. He got to be king in Judah, but then it's years later before he actually gets to be king of Israel. So because Saul's son took on that role for a couple of years. And David's having to run around and hide. But I never, does anybody ever see David as a preacher? You see him as a shepherd and as the king and a soldier and a husband. I never see him as a preacher. In this psalm, I want you to read this when you get home today, Psalm 40. I'm only going to do a section of it. But I want you to read this. He writes in this, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have opened. Everybody's consumed with how do we go about doing what we're supposed to be doing? And it was all about sacrifice and offering. For them coming to where it would have been the tabernacle at Shiloh, coming to where the gathering was of the people, And this is where the assembly of God took place. These people coming to this place. He said, my ears were opened. And I think that's the most important thing. Burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then he said, here am I. I have come. It's written about me in the scroll. I desire to do your will, my God. Your law is within my heart. That's David. This is the stuff he would preach to the gathering, to the assembly. The people would come, and I've never seen David as a preacher. I've never thought of him as a preacher. But he was. Because this psalm is all about, look, I tried to get some things happening, and I shared about what was going on. And I shared the fact that the scroll was written about, it pointed to me. And Israel, for instance, they rejected David as king for years. Because it just didn't seem right that somebody from Judah and the southern tribe would end up being the king here. And yet God himself, if God had initiated this and anointed him king, surely it would have made it easy. But it wasn't easy. And this is King David. You can't get a better strategist, tactician, soldier. He was brave as brave can be, and he had a heart after God. And yet it was difficult. I proclaim your saving acts in the great assembly. I do not seal my lips, Lord, as you know. I do not hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak of your faithfulness and your saving help. I do not conceal your love and your faithfulness from the great assembly. You see that? So he's actually saying, this is when we gathered, when the people of Israel gathered together, it was the assembly of God. I proclaimed this. I proclaimed you, your greatness, how wonderful you are, your faithfulness. He didn't start proclaiming his faithfulness. You know, his picture of God. How did he have this that was so different from Saul? I think it was just the fact that he spent so much time building that relationship with God in the first place. You know, he was in the desert as a boy. And he was reliant upon the power of God to help him do the job that he was supposed to do. You know, the bear and the lion that he'd taken care of, all that sort of stuff in the stories. But David had this heart after God, but it was developed through a relationship that grew because he spent time with God, right? And there was something unique about the way he interacted with God. And we can't have an ear to hear what God is saying if we spend no time with God. And the scriptures, the New Testament say, you know, he who has an ear to hear what it is the Spirit is saying to the churches, let them listen. And I thought, I'm standing in Antarctica. How is it that Cammie heard whales and I didn't? And I think there's times when the frequency, do we listen to God? And he said he waited patiently. Are we in the silence or are we in the noise in life? There's so much noise that there's so many voices coming in. Where will you get your ideas about what this church needs to do going forward? It's a good question, isn't it? You're thinking, as a church, we're all in this together. Where would you get your ideas about what this church needs to do to go forward? And here's where I think it comes from. I think it's your upbringing. I think you'll look back and go, what did we used to do? Remember when we went on camp and we went away to such and such? Oh, we need to get the youth together. What youth? We will think back like that. But even just a few years ago, but that was pre-COVID. We will think back. It's our upbringing that makes us, I think like this. The churches you visit. You go to visit another church and you go, oh, this is so fantastic. We need to do what this church is doing. So you come back and you go, this is what we need to do. I think this is what happens. Conferences. We go to conferences. And there at the conference, they G you up and tell you, like, this is what you've got to be doing in churches. And you come back and the pastor comes back, oh, look at all these new plans I've got because this is what we're going to. I think this happens. And then books. You know, I like to read books. I love to read books. Or it could be a model you like. So therefore, it's like, this is the style of thing that I think is important. It suits me. And I know it'll suit other people. So I think this is where will we get our ideas? It's really important for us to actually be just honest. Where are my ideas coming from? But it could also come from dissatisfaction. You go, I've thought about this. I thought that faith doesn't kill churches, but fear will. Fear will kill churches. Faith will not kill churches. There is no way if we live out our faith, and this is important for us. So years ago, and here's where I want to go sort of like into a personal reflection. Years ago, I came across this term, visioneering. I wanted to introduce you to that today. But Cami and I were living as a family in the United States, and we had young children, and I was in Baptist church over there working as a deacon, but I taught Sunday school to youth. So I had years 10, 11, and 12, and I loved it. Just loved working with these young boys. And they actually hated church. But they loved coming to my class on Sunday mornings because their mum and dad made them come to church. And they would have Sunday school before church. And I was teaching this. And I learned to interact with these boys. And they would come into this, and they loved it. And I've still got friendships today with some of these boys that still write to me and still come to visit me. And I felt like that in my heart, it was like, there's something else I'm supposed to be doing with my life. You ever felt that? Like there's something else. And so I told Cami, I said, we're going to sell everything we have, and we're going to move to Australia, and we're going to have a new life there. And she said, okay. How amazing is that? She didn't even ask me too many questions. And I did. I sold my business, and it's like I knew there was supposed to be something else we were doing. And came to Australia, and I thought it has to be something really big. So, I managed this huge factory. It nearly killed me. It was really difficult. Here in Brisbane, massive place, 100 people working there, and you all the noise all day long of everything that you had to do, and you had to be the boss. And I got to be really tough. It really wasn't good for my spirituality because I was having to just be, this is the way you've got to do it. People say, I can't do it. I don't hear that. Get it done. I was just, in the softness, the tenderness of wanting to serve God dissipated. And I got to the point where I knew that there was something else I was supposed to do. And the church that I was at, Maroochydore Baptist, Phil Greenby had just got there, and we got there within 2 months of him getting there. And then they hired a youth pastor, and he got sick almost right away with Ross River fever and couldn't do whatever he was supposed to be doing. And so Phil said to me, can you help? And so they asked me to teach a Bible class on Sunday mornings every second week. So while church is taking place, I was teaching a Bible class every second week. And this thing just filled up. And it was just packed. And we were just breaking at the seams with all these kids. And so then they came to me and said, can you run the youth group? So I was running the youth group on Friday nights. And again, it just exploded. It just went ballistic. And Phil said, I think I really want you to be the youth pastor. And my heart was like, oh, this is right. I really want to do this. Then he went back to the board, and the board said, no, he's not trained. He can't be the youth pastor. We need to get somebody else. And so I was basically dismissed, and they put somebody else in to look after him. And all the kids were devastated, like it was awesome what was taking place. And I felt rejected and hurt. And so one day I came to Cami and I said, I'm going to Bible college. I'm going to go and get trained. That's what I'm going to go and do. And so I had at that time had left the business, and I had my own business. I gave my business away to a friend of mine that was in competition to me. I said, here's all my gear, here's all my clients, take care of them. And Cami said, well, how are we going to survive? I said, we're going to make it. We really didn't have that much anyway. And she worked hard and put me through Bible college. And I went and did it 3 years full time. And it was the furthest thing from my mind to do this. And I just stayed at it. And then when I got through, I was actually too old. Because I was like 44. And if you were 25, 26, 28, you were an ideal candidate. But there wasn't really anything for me. And I had to go through these accreditation processes, and it was slow, and nothing happened. And I didn't come from the right church, because at that time I'd moved from Maritchi Baptist down to Caloundra Baptist because they'd asked me to come and work with their young people in the school. And so I was doing that as a student, basically as a student pastor. And it wasn't really the right place. And they didn't know what was going on, and they weren't going forward with anything at all. And so, but in my final year, I was preaching. So the theology lecturer had got me a couple of gigs. And I would go around to all these different churches around Brisbane, mainly, some on the Sunshine Coast. In my final year, I preached 32 times in 6 different denominations. And I did not promote myself once. It was invitations. He said, come, come, come. And so at the end of the year, we graduated, and I said to Cami, right, let's sell the house and be ready to go wherever God calls us to go. So she said, okay. So I've got a daughter in year 9 and a son in year 11, and as a family, we all said, okay. That's what we were. We were a team. Family was a team. So Sid, my son, used to go with me wherever I would preach in Brisbane, and he would tag along with me. He still looks back and says that was one of the most amazing times in his life. He got to co-tag along with Dad. And so we did. We sold the house, ready to go. And I went back to America, back to that same church that I'd come from. And in some ways, they felt like we were still, members there in some way, because I had spent 14 years there at that church. And I didn't really know what to do. And then I got an invitation from the Southern Baptist Convention in Arkansas to come and preach at their assembly. I mean, there's 1,200, 1,400 Baptist churches in the state of Arkansas alone, just in that state. And so there's this massive big place, and they wanted me to come and talk about evangelism. And I came and preached, and then they said, are you ordained? I said, no, I've got to go through all these processes. We want to ordain you. And so they arranged an ordination service for me on the 7th of March, 2004. I know that because I have a Bible given to me by my church there. And I didn't know what we were going to do. We'd sold the house. Cami had returned back to Australia. We rented another place, waiting for where are we going to go? I had no idea. And at that point in time, this man that was there at this conference came up to me and said, I want you to read a book by Andy Stanley. It's called Visioneering. So I went and got that book, and I started to read it. And within hours, I knew this book was just like God was pouring out to me, just telling me, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and plant a church. But I want you to go back to the same region that you're at. Because what was taking place was there was a real gap in churches where kids would grow up through the youth group, get to basically university age, and they were dropping out of church. And they would return back when they had a young family. But there was this big gap. And it was like, I knew that we could approach this. What if we designed a church to reach this group? So that was the group we intended to reach. And I came back and I was talking to someone, I was talking to the Baptist Union, and they go, oh, you got to do home groups. I said, I don't want to do home groups. This is what I want to try and do. Anyway, there's no help from anybody. Talk to the churches, no help. But these people had actually commissioned me. And they sent me to do this. You see, this is the power of God. This isn't man's way of doing things. And so I heard this, and then I came back and started doing things. And I came to Cami and I said, I was trying to go into Coromandel because there was no churches in that area. And Cami said, you're in the wrong area. You've got the right idea, you're in the wrong area. And I had written an essay in one of my years at college about how you could, use a picture theatre and you could show movies and then you'd have a theatre for church on Sundays, because I thought that's a great way of being able to make it sustainable. It's a different model of church, if you will. And I know I don't have any money to build a picture theatre. So I thought, I'm just going to go down to Sunshine Plaza. So I went down to Sunshine Plaza to the movie theatre, and I walked in there. There was a lady in there. I don't even know who she was. I said, hey, what's the chances of us having church here on Sunday? And she looked at me, she said, what a great idea. Let me take you down the back. I'll show you the room that we've got. And she took me back into this room. It's called the function room. It was a big, beautiful room. Seats everywhere. It had bathrooms off to the side. It had a little kitchenette. I said, and how much would you be charging for this? She said, $28 an hour. I didn't do that. I said, okay. But, my heart was in the theatre. I was like, and how much to rent one of the theatres? She said, $65 an hour. I said, okay. I said, we're going to start not this Sunday, but next Sunday. Is that okay? She said, yes. I said, we'll start in the function room. Now, we had our first service May 9th, 2004, in the function room with 28 people at $28 an hour. And look at the time gap there. March 7, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then reading a book, I was like, I know what we're supposed to do. And Cami said, you've got it right. And once we did this, and then I had to call around and see if I could, hey, all you guys that aren't going to church, will you come to church? Will you give this a go? And we had 28 people. That church in 1 year grew to 120 people. My mother came the next Mother's Day. So that was actually Mother's Day we started. I didn't even have this figured out. We started church on a Mother's Day, but it worked out fine. Now Church at the Riverwalk has just called me and said, will you come and do the anniversary, the 20th anniversary? Come and preach for us this year. So I said, yeah, I'll be up there to do the anniversary. And you see, that's the hand of God, that this would happen. But it was really different. Church at the Riverwalk was designed to reach people that didn't like church. So I knew exactly what we were trying to do, because I knew that everything else was sort of covered, but there's this gap. And so I sort of started to think through things, and it was post-high school, pre-children, and I came up with these ideas. I was like, how do we design this? And I came up with this thought that a 23-year-old is still cool, right? They are. But they're young enough to run a corporation, so they can make things happen. That's where we need to aim our music, our messages, everything is at that age group. And then what would happen is they would draw in people that are just a little bit younger than them, and then those people would draw in people that are just a little bit younger than them, but then also they would draw in people just a bit older, because they go, it still feels good in here. And so I just said, we'd just lock in on this 23-year-old group. A year on, like I said, we had 120 people in the church, and I did a calculation of all the people that are there. The average age of the church was 23. So this is God. You couldn't make that happen. And there were these principles. It was to be relaxed and relevant, relational and responsible. That was that was it. We actually didn't have church meetings. We didn't need them, because people just came. They just loved it. And it was this, everything had to be that way, but it was cafe style music, and it suited Jack Johnson at the time was kind of cool, but it was something manageable. And we were going into a church service with 1 hour in mind. So we had a 30-minute setup to get everything ready, 50-minute service, 10 minutes to pull it down and pack it away. And they gave us a place to put our stuff. And we were paying less than $100 a week. And it had taken us a few months to get into the theatre, but $100 a week. And it was epic. And it just took off. We had message card. You would get a folder, and every week you would get a message card. My daughter still has all of her message cards. She just loved it. She loved the fact that they'd sit there and they'd try and guess what I was going to say because I'd have a blank, and they're all sitting there trying to figure it out. So I had to make them harder because, sometimes they could guess it and it was just too easy. But this is pre-smartphone era. As soon as smartphone era took off, and then social media started to come in later on, like there was, MySpace was available and a few things like that, but it was, we suited the age that we were in. You cannot take this and replicate this at all today, the approach that we took. It suited 20 years ago. Today it has less impact because they've forgotten their mission. So what were we trying to do? And now it's really actually a comfortable place because we don't have to put the seats out. It's air conditioned and there's good parking. It's a great place to go. But it was a mission. It was a mission. We ended up going down into a place where we put one of the guys showed up. We were just praying down at the beach. One of the guys showed up and said he owned a shop down there at Alex Headland. And he was trying to do a surf shop with his son, and it was never going to start. I said, well, let's make that our mission base. That became our mission base for 7 years, And we would sell surfboards and skateboards, and kids would come in there. And then we did 2 doors down. We had another church on a Monday night at a cafe, because the people there couldn't get to church on Sunday. We're like, how do you reach people that don't like church? And that's what we were doing, and we continued to do that. And it took off. But where it actually lost momentum was the fact that people wanted to revert to a model that they once knew. It's like the place that they'd left, they wanted it to be more like that. And yet the place that they left there because they didn't want to be there. And so you had just an influx of people trying to realize that actually the young people, and this was older people, that, by the way, the young people loved it the way it was. And I just thought it was just epic. But I just had some older people that were a little bit more seasoned veterans, and they were like, yeah, you guys aren't. I remember one Sunday morning, I asked them to play the song Imagine, John Lennon's song, Imagine. And the worship leader said, I'm not playing Imagine in church. And I said, no, it goes along, And another one was sitting on the dock of the bay. Loneliness won't leave me alone. And, it was a message about loneliness. But they couldn't get the fact that they thought this isn't God honoring because it's not a model that we're used to. And yet we were reaching people. And I think this is where, in my heart, is like, God had given me this idea that we've got to reach this group of young people. And we were. And my question is will we be willing to explore new frontiers, or will we follow a popular model of church? Now, going forward as a church, will we just want to follow a popular model, something that we see working down the street? Or will we go, what is our objective? Who are we trying to reach? How are we going to do that? Would we actually do that? Could we do that? It's just a question. I don't have an answer on this. But I think these are the sort of questions we've got to ask ourselves. What if God has already spoken to this church? We put some jumps out there, and there were hundreds of kids that knew about this place. And there's a whole bunch of kids that just loved coming here. And sure, they made a mess. But what if God's already spoken to us? What if God has already said, this, I want you to start with this? Would we know? Would we have ears to hear what it is the Spirit is saying to the church? Or would we, I've come from another place, I know what we should be doing, do that? What if God is speaking to us? Are we listening to God? I was so disappointed with what took place. And I got to Antarctica, and my thoughts were, there was the mission. Here's these kids that are lost as goose eggs and love to be here. But we didn't know how to configure what we were doing in order to reach the people that we're here. But what would we likely say? We'd say, oh, we need to reach young families. But how? And for what reason? Is it just so we can pay the bills? You know, because you know what I mean? How much money is coming through the place? Is it sustainable? I think fear got us. You know, the fact that there was a weird deal with the insurance company where the Baptist Union had gone and put all their eggs in one basket on an insurance company for liability insurance that went bankrupt. And it was a Catholic insurance company. And then they had to madly scramble and try and reconfigure stuff. But you know, we can get insurance. That's not a problem. But fear got a hold of us, not faith. Fear grabbed a hold of us. And what if that was God speaking to us? Would we know? And here I want to summarize, so I'll end it with this. I want to summarize the psalm, all right, of David. Psalm 40. Just summarize it and put it into the context of this church. And if the Crossing Church waited patiently until they heard from God, right? That was David. But this is us. Waited patiently until we heard from God. They believed God gave them the right foundation. What is the foundation? And they wanted to do whatever God wanted them to do. That was the hunger. You know, David was like, I just want to do what you want me to do. Is that us? And so when people are looking at this, they were reporting on us. This is what's being said. This is what we wanted to do. They promoted God's ability to save. God's ability to save. They weren't promoting themselves. They had personal problems and sins to contend with. You actually got to read this psalm and look what David says about himself. He was far from perfect. And he put that forward in the assembly. I think it's remarkable. Read this scripture. It's mind-blowingly good. They had plenty of opposition. David had so much going against him, and there's so many things that are going to come against us. If we're going to do anything good, there'll be opposition. I don't know why. I don't know why it is that Satan has to mess with a church. Well, it's simple. Because what if the church actually starts to do something that's working in mission? He can disrupt it. He will do that. Why bother with trying to disrupt the community that's already his? They knew the mission was greater than their abilities. And I think this is, you know, if this was people saying they knew the mission was greater and they knew God would help them. That's the summary, putting it into context for us. If people would look at our church and look at this time period in history, and they would say Psalm 40 for the Crossing Church. And I think this is what's important for us. And so today as we go, we're going to go and have sing some more songs here and go and have a cup of coffee, but we'll have a church meeting. I think we need to be mindful of God. What is God saying? What is God saying to you? And how does he speak to you? And like Cammie, like the fact that she could stand on a hill and hear whales, can we stand here and hear God? Will we be silent enough to hear from God? Or have we ever got preconceived ideas? This is what God said to us. I think we all have to be able to look at that. So what is God saying to us? And then how will we respond? And it's like Cammie said to me, you got to jump on this. You know, you don't get to go somewhere good if you don't go there. You just get to talk about it. If someone gives you an opportunity to do something, and you go, it's going to cost us. But we need to do this. And I think that's with God. And my concern, when I look at my children, I'm convinced that my children love the Lord and the church because they worked on mission with me. I'm convinced of that. Like we were family. We were team. We just, everything we did, we had music practice at our house. You know, but my kids went willingly in year 9 and year 11. Sid goes into year 12, and he looks back, it was one of the greatest years of his life, the beginnings of the church. And, you know, he got to run all kinds of things where we didn't have any. We'd do youth group down at Mooloolaba Beach playing volleyball and soccer because that was what we had. But a lot of those people look back on that time period and that year, 13 people were baptized that year. There were people that in the time period that I was there for that came from Japan and France and Germany and the United States and Canada and England and Ireland, giving their lives to Christ, as well as some Aussies. You know, why? You know, it was really just God. Just being able to say, what are you saying to us, God? It doesn't matter that everybody agrees with you or not. Sometimes you have to take a stand and say, this is what God has called us to do. And as a church, we cannot let the model determine our mission. Our mission determines the model. Let's pray. Almighty God, you speak through your word, and I know this was long. But God, you speak in the silence and you speak through the preaching, you speak in the assembly. God, we want to hear from you. We want to be a church that just does what you want us to do. That's all we want to do. Completely. As a congregation, as a gathering, as individuals. God, we want to hear from you and we want to do what you want us to do. God, speak clearly into our lives. Please, God. Guide us, direct us, strengthen us. Let us not be driven by fear, but by faith. You know, let us be a church known for how we responded from Psalm 40. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.